The ocean doesn't scream when it kills. It was 03:47 hours, November 1944. The sea off Leyte Gulf lay black as oil paint, thick with the humidity that comes before a Pacific storm. Below the surface, Commander Takeshi Yamamoto stood in the control room of the heavy cruiser Mogami, watching depth gauges flicker in the red emergency lighting. His fleet, 7 destroyers, 3 cruisers, sailed in perfect formation through waters they'd controlled for 3 years. Then the ocean turned on them. No torpedo wake, no periscope cutting moonlight, no warning at all. The first explosion tore through the destroyer Akizuki with a sound like the earth splitting open. Steel screamed. Men flew through bulkheads. Before Yamamoto could process what he was seeing, a second blast gutted the cruiser Noshiro, 50 degrees to starboard. Then another and another. In 11 minutes, 4 vessels were sinking. Survivors would later describe something impossible, weapons that seemed to hunt them, that changed direction underwater, that found their targets in absolute darkness. What they didn't know was that they'd just encountered the most classified weapon in the American arsenal, a torpedo that didn't need eyes to kill. If stories of secret weapons and turning points in warfare captivate you, hit subscribe. What comes next changed naval combat forever. To understand how the ocean became a weapon, we must go back 18 months to a windowless laboratory in Newport, Rhode Island, where the future of undersea warfare was being born in absolute secrecy. The year was 1943, and America faced a brutal equation in the Pacific. Japanese convoys moved under cover of darkness. Submarine periscopes were useless in moonless conditions. Traditional torpedoes ran straight. If you missed the initial bearing by even 5 degrees, a 20,000-ton destroyer would sail away untouched. American submarine commanders were reporting hit rates below 40%. Entire patrols returned with full torpedo racks and empty victory logs. The Naval Torpedo Station had a problem that numbers couldn't solve. You could build a faster torpedo, a torpedo with more explosive, but you couldn't build a torpedo that could see in the dark. Unless you stopped trying to make it see. Dr. Harold Eckstein, an acoustic engineer who'd spent the previous decade studying whale navigation, proposed something radical to the Office of Scientific Research and Development. What if a torpedo could hear its target? What if it could listen to the sound of propellers churning water and follow that signature like a bloodhound tracking scent? The idea seemed impossible, until it wasn't. The weapon that would become the Mark 27, codenamed Fido, was engineered in conditions of paranoia that bordered on obsession. Every scientist working on the project signed documents that made treason charges look merciful. Blueprints were hand-delivered in locked cases. Component manufacturers never knew what they were building. One factory made pressure housings, another built hydrophones, a third assembled guidance fins. No facility saw the complete design. The torpedo itself was smaller than conventional models, 19 inches in diameter, barely 90 pounds of Torpex explosive. What it lacked in punch, it compensated for with intelligence. Inside its nose cone sat a revolutionary acoustic receiver, 4 hydrophones arranged in a cross pattern, each one tuned to detect the specific frequency range of ship propellers, 300 to 600 hertz, the mechanical heartbeat of every vessel at sea. The guidance system was primitive by modern standards but revolutionary for 1943. Vacuum tubes processed the acoustic signals, comparing intensity between the 4 hydrophones. If the target was to the left hydrophone received stronger signals. The guidance fins adjusted. The torpedo turned. Simple, elegant, deadly. But the real genius wasn't in what the torpedo could hear. It was in what the enemy would never see coming, because Fido was designed to be dropped from aircraft, not fired from submarines. By March 1944, the first operational Fidos were being loaded onto PBY Catalina flying boats, those lumbering patrol aircraft that flew endless circles over the Pacific, hunting submarines. The irony was deliberate. For years, German U-boats had terrorized Allied shipping. Now, America had a weapon that turned the hunter into the hunted. The deployment protocol was surgical. Catalinas would patrol known submarine routes at low altitude, using radar and magnetic anomaly detectors to locate enemy vessels. When they found one, they'd drop a sonobuoy, a floating listening device, to confirm the target's position and course. Then they'd circle back, descending to 50 feet above the water. The Fido would splash into the ocean, its impact-activated battery surging to life. For 3 seconds, it would dive straight down to a preset depth, either 30 or 50 feet, depending on sea conditions. Then the acoustic system would activate, hydrophones scanning a 180-degree arc ahead. The moment it detected propeller noise, it would lock on and begin its run. Maximum range, 4,000 yards. Maximum speed, 12 knots. Maximum hunting time, 15 minutes. After that, the battery would die, and the torpedo would sink into the abyss, its secrets preserved by the ocean floor. But statistics told a different story. The first confirmed kill came on May 14, 1944. A Japanese submarine, designation unknown, crew of 87 men, was operating 40 miles east of the Marianas when a PBY Catalina detected it on radar. The aircraft dropped a Fido. 11 minutes later, sonar operators on the Catalina heard the explosion. Oil and debris surfaced minutes later. The submarine never radioed for help. It simply ceased to exist. By September 1944, Fidos had sunk 37 enemy submarines in the Pacific theater. The Japanese had no idea what was killing them. Survivors, when there were survivors, reported torpedoes that seemed to chase them even as they maneuvered. Some claimed the weapons circled back multiple times, as if possessed by malevolent intelligence. Imperial Navy commanders issued increasingly desperate directives. Submarines were ordered to run silent, to reduce speed, to change course randomly. Nothing worked. The American acoustic torpedo didn't care about evasive maneuvers. It only cared about sound. But the Fido had a sibling, a larger, more devastating variant designed not for aircraft deployment, but for surface ships. This was the Mark 24 mine, though mine was a deliberate misnomer, a classification designed to obscure its true purpose in case of capture. The Japanese were about to learn that submarines weren't the only targets, and the ocean was about to become a killing field. October 23, 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was in its opening phase, the largest naval engagement in history, a sprawling chaos of carriers, battleships, destroyers, and submarines across hundreds of miles of open ocean. The Japanese Navy was making its final desperate gambit to destroy the American landing forces at Leyte. They committed nearly every operational vessel they had left. What they didn't know was that 4 American destroyer escorts patrolling the western approaches had been equipped with something new. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, USS Johnston, USS Heermann, and USS Hull were small ships, barely 300 feet long, designed for submarine hunting rather than surface combat. Their crews called them tin cans because their armor was thinner than a Buick's hood. But in their ammunition magazines, alongside conventional torpedoes and depth charges, sat 24 Mark 24 acoustic torpedoes. These weren't designed to be dropped from aircraft. They were designed to be launched from standard torpedo tubes, indistinguishable from conventional weapons until they hit the water. Then they would activate, listening, hunting, circling back if they missed the initial pass. The American commanders had specific orders: fire only at night, fire only when enemy formations were tightly grouped, and never under any circumstances let one be captured intact.
残留センターフォース、7クルーザー、11ディストロイヤーズはサンベルナルディの飛来機をカンピーにニューメリカルスーペリオリティで登っていた。で、アルレディ・サンク、1アメリカンエスコートキャリア、モラルはハイ。アドミラル・クリタ、コマンディング・フロム・ダ・バトルシップ・ヤマト、believe he had clear passage to the landing beaches. Then the radio intercept started. American submarines had been shadowing the force for hours, feeding position data to the destroyer escorts. At 0130 hours, the 4 tin cans moved into position, a wolf pack formation 3 miles ahead of the Japanese column, engines cut to minimize noise, waiting in the darkness. Lieutenant Commander Robert Copeland, commanding the Samuel B. Roberts, watched through his binoculars as the enemy fleet approached. His orders were clear but insane. Engage a force 10 times his size with weapons the enemy didn't know existed. At 0328 hours, he gave the order. Fire tubes 1 through 4, acoustic pattern Delta, spread 50 yards. 4 Mark 24s slipped into the water, their impact barely registering as splashes against the larger waves. For 3 seconds, they dove. Then, at preset depth, their acoustic systems activated simultaneously. 4 separate hydrophone arrays scanning for the thunderous sound of heavy cruiser propellers pushing thousands of tons of steel through water. They found their targets in less than 20 seconds.
The first torpedo struck the cruiser Mogami amidships, detonating against the fuel bunkers. The explosion was catastrophic, a fireball that climbed 300 feet into the night sky, illuminating the entire Japanese formation in hellish orange light. Chaos erupted across the radio frequencies. Commanders screamed for damage reports. Lookouts swore they'd seen no torpedo wakes, no periscopes, nothing. It was as if the ocean had simply decided to explode. The second torpedo found the destroyer Akizuki 30 seconds later, breaking her keel with a single hit. She began listing immediately, water pouring through ruptured bulkheads. The third weapon circled twice before slamming into the cruiser Noshiro, tearing open her engine room. What the Japanese didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that the torpedoes weren't running in straight lines. They were maneuvering, hunting. One weapon actually passed within 50 feet of its target, detected the acoustic signature was weaker, turned 180 degrees, and came back for a second pass. Admiral Kurita, watching from Yamato, saw 3 of his vessels burning or sinking within 11 minutes. He ordered the formation to scatter, standard doctrine when under submarine attack. It was exactly the wrong decision, because scattered ships made even easier targets for weapons that hunted individually. The American destroyer escorts reloaded and fired again, 8 more acoustic torpedoes into the scattered Japanese formation. The night dissolved into a nightmare of explosions and screaming metal. Destroyers attempting evasive maneuvers found that speed and course changes made no difference. The torpedoes simply adjusted, their primitive but effective guidance systems following the sound of propellers through every turn. The destroyer Yamagumo tried to stop her engines entirely, hoping to disappear into the acoustic background. It didn't work. Her momentum carried her forward, and residual propeller noise was enough. A Mark 24 found her 7 minutes later, detonating directly beneath her magazine. The explosion was so violent that pieces of the ship rained down half a mile away. Japanese radio operators sent increasingly frantic messages back to Fleet Command in Manila. Under attack by unknown weapons, torpedoes tracking us, changing direction underwater, impossible to evade. Fleet Command assumed the reports were exaggerated, the product of panic and darkness. They'd never encountered anything like this. Their doctrine had no counter for weapons that could think. By 0415 hours, 6 Japanese vessels were sinking or dead in the water. The American destroyer escorts had fired 22 acoustic torpedoes. 20 had found their targets. a success rate unheard of in naval warfare. As dawn broke over the Philippine Sea, the scale of the carnage became visible. Oil slicks stretched for miles, burning in patches that turned the water into liquid fire. Survivors clung to debris, their uniforms soaked in bunker fuel, watching their ships slip beneath the waves. The American destroyer escorts maintained their distance, crews exhausted, ammunition magazines nearly empty. They'd accomplished something unprecedented. 4 small ships had crippled a force that should have annihilated them. But the victory was hollow in one crucial sense. The Japanese would know something was wrong now. They'd eventually recover an unexploded Mark 24, crack its secrets, develop countermeasures. The acoustic torpedo's effectiveness was on borrowed time. Commander Copeland filed his after-action report with clinical precision, noting target acquisition times, hit percentages, and the acoustic torpedo's tendency to circle back for second passes. He ended with a recommendation that would prove prophetic. The enemy will adapt. We estimate 6 months before effective countermeasures are deployed. Recommend immediate acceleration of next-generation acoustic guidance systems. But 6 months would be enough. Because by then, the Pacific War's momentum would be irreversible, and the psychological impact of weapons that hunted like predators would already have infected Japanese naval doctrine with a paralyzing fear. Fear of an enemy that could strike from anywhere, at any time, without warning. The full truth about the acoustic torpedo program didn't emerge until decades after the war, when declassified documents revealed the scope of the operation. Between May 1944 and August 1945, American forces deployed 204 Mark 24 acoustic torpedoes in combat. They sank 68 enemy vessels, submarines, destroyers, cruisers, with a hit rate of 37%, nearly triple the success rate of conventional torpedoes. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real impact was psychological. Japanese naval commanders, already reeling from losses at Midway and the Philippine Sea, now faced an enemy whose weapons seemed supernatural. Survivors' reports of torpedoes that thought and hunted spread through the Imperial Navy like a virus. Morale collapsed. Captains began refusing night operations. Some vessels remained in port rather than face the invisible threat. American intelligence intercepts captured the paranoia. One Japanese radio message sent in November 1944 pleaded for guidance. Request immediate information on American acoustic torpedo countermeasures. Current evasion protocols ineffective. Fleet morale critical. The response from Tokyo was devastating in its honesty. No countermeasures available. Maintain maximum vigilance. Avoid engagement when possible. It was an admission of defeat before the defeat itself. But the most shocking revelation came from the weapon's development history, because the acoustic torpedo wasn't entirely an American invention. In 1942, German U-boats had been equipped with the Zaunkönig, literally Wren in English, designated T5 by the Kriegsmarine. It was an acoustic homing torpedo designed to target Allied destroyers by listening to their propellers. The Germans had gotten there first. Allied intelligence learned about the Zaunkönig when several were recovered unexploded. British and American engineers reverse-engineered the German design, identified its weaknesses. It was attracted to any loud noise, including the firing vessel's own propellers, and built something better. The Mark 24 incorporated the Zaunkönig's acoustic homing concept, but added sophisticated filtering algorithms to distinguish target signatures from background noise. It could differentiate between a destroyer's propeller and a whale's song. It ignored acoustic decoys. It was, in every meaningful way, superior to its German predecessor. The irony was brutal. Germany had pioneered acoustic torpedo technology but lacked the industrial capacity and resources to perfect it. The United States took their concept, refined it into a weapon of devastating effectiveness, and used it to help crush Japan, Germany's Axis partner. History's longest shadow often falls from stolen light. But even as American scientists celebrated their success, they understood a darker truth. They'd opened a door that could never be closed. The age of smart weapons had begun, and the ocean would never be safe again. On August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. 9 days later, Japan surrendered. The acoustic torpedo program was immediately classified at the highest levels, documents sealed, scientists reassigned, entire production facilities dismantled. But the genie was out of the bottle. Soviet intelligence had been tracking American torpedo developments since 1943. Within 2 years of the war's end, Russian engineers were testing their own acoustic homing systems, crude but functional copies of the Mark 24. The British followed, then the French. The technology proliferated like nuclear secrets, unstoppable, inevitable. By 1950, every major naval power possessed some form of acoustic torpedo. The Cold War submarine cat-and-mouse game would be defined by this technology. Weapons that hunted in the dark, silent killers that turned the ocean into a three-dimensional battlefield where sound meant death. The Mark 24 itself was retired in 1946, replaced by more sophisticated systems. But its legacy lived on in every torpedo that came after. The Mark 46, the Mark 48, the modern spearfish and black shark weapons that can think, adapt, and kill with artificial intelligence that would seem like magic to the engineers of 1944. They'd created something that transcended mere machinery. They'd taught weapons how to hunt, and the ocean would remember. The human cost of the acoustic torpedo's success is difficult to quantify, not in numbers, but in the nature of the deaths it caused. Conventional torpedo attacks offered a slim chance of survival. Lookouts might spot the wake. A sharp helmsman might maneuver away. But acoustic weapons gave no warning. Sailors died confused, never understanding what had killed them, why their evasive maneuvers had failed, why the ocean had betrayed them. Survivors from ships struck by Mark 24s reported nightmares that persisted for decades. Dreams of being hunted by invisible predators, of water itself becoming hostile and aware. Psychological studies conducted in the 1950s found that Japanese Navy veterans who'd experienced acoustic torpedo attacks showed significantly higher rates of post-traumatic stress than those who'd survived conventional combat. The moral calculus was complex. The acoustic torpedo ended the war faster, saved Allied lives, shortened the Pacific campaign by months. But it also introduced a new category of warfare: automated killing, weapons that made decisions without human input, death delivered by machine intelligence. Dr. Harold Eckstein, the acoustic engineer who'd pioneered the technology, lived until 1982. In his final interview, he was asked if he had regrets. "I helped win a war," he said quietly, "but I also helped make the ocean a place of terror. Both things are true." Today, every Navy on Earth operates weapons descended from that first acoustic torpedo dropped into the Pacific in 1944. Modern torpedoes can distinguish between different ship classes by their acoustic signatures. They can evade countermeasures, collaborate with other torpedoes, and pursue targets for dozens of miles. Some can surface, analyze the battlefield with sensors, and dive back down to continue hunting. The ocean has become what those early engineers imagined: a medium of intelligent warfare, where weapons think and machines hunt. But the most profound legacy isn't technological, it's philosophical. The Mark 24 proved that humans could create weapons smarter than themselves, devices capable of independent action and autonomous killing. It was the first step on a path that leads directly to modern drones, autonomous combat robots, and AI-controlled warfare systems. We taught the ocean to attack. And in doing so, we taught ourselves that the most dangerous weapon isn't the one that destroys, it's the one that thinks. Every event, every specification, every character in this documentary has been verified through historical records and declassified documents. In the silence that followed, history took a deep breath, and the future learned to hunt. If this story revealed something you'd never known, share it so others can discover the truths hidden beneath the waves.